Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The plasma bolt missed Tobias Crane's head by inches, superheating the stone column behind him into molten slag. He pressed himself against the ancient wall, feeling the tremor of another explosion shake dust from the temple's carved ceiling. The ruins of Velcaris had seen 3 centuries of war, and tonight they might claim one more casualty. "Director Vance is going to love this," he muttered, checking the charge on his sidearm. 12%. Enough for maybe 3 shots. The Sarkoth war cry echoed from his left, guttural and furious. From his right came the chittering response of Zhren soldiers, their mandibles clicking in anticipation. Both sides wanted him dead now. That's what happened when you stopped playing by their rules. Tobias ran. The temple's inner sanctum loomed ahead, its entrance carved with symbols that predated both warring species. He'd spent 6 months tracking down references to this place in forbidden archives, following breadcrumbs through black market dealers and dead-end leads. The old texts spoke of a summoning circle, of a being who had cursed these factions, of 3 wishes that could end everything. Or start something worse. He slid through the doorway as energy fire tore chunks from the frame. The chamber beyond was exactly as described, circular, carved from black stone that seemed to drink the light from his tactical lamp. In the center, etched into the floor, a pattern of interlocking symbols pulsed with faint luminescence. No time for second thoughts. Tobias pulled the folded paper from his jacket, the translation he'd paid a lunar station mystic far too much for. The words felt wrong in his mouth, consonants that didn't exist in human languages, vowels that tasted like copper and smoke. He spoke them anyway, reading faster as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. The last syllable left his lips. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the symbols erupted with crimson light. Smoke poured from the circle, black and thick, coalescing into form. Tobias stumbled back, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The smoke solidified into curves and edges, into pale skin that seemed to glow against the darkness. She stood in the center of the circle, and the air itself bent around her. Bellith was taller than him, statuesque in a way that made the word beautiful seem inadequate. Her skin was the color of fresh snow, unblemished and luminous. Crimson hair fell past her shoulders in waves that moved with a life of their own. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath, burning red, ancient beyond measure, fixed on him with an intensity that felt physical. And her horns, massive black obsidian curves that swept back from her temples, ridged and sharp, catching the light like polished glass. "Well," she said, her voice low and rich with amusement, "another species discovers my circle. How delightfully predictable." She stepped forward, moving with liquid grace, and the smoke dissipated around her. The dress she wore, if it could be called that, was deep crimson, cut to reveal more than it concealed. Every movement suggested power barely leashed. "Let me guess," Bellith continued, circling him slowly. "You want to win the war, or perhaps save your people. Maybe revenge against someone who wronged you." Her lips curved into a smile that promised dark pleasures. "They all want something, and I give them exactly what they ask for." Tobias forced himself to meet her eyes, even as he felt the weight of her presence pressing against his thoughts. "You cursed them, the Sarkoth and the Zhren, 300 years ago." "Cursed?" She laughed, the sound like silk dragging across bare skin. "They summoned me. They made their wishes. I simply granted them. You made them hate each other forever. They wanted victory, both of them. I gave them war eternal, a victory that never ends, a defeat that never comes." She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. "And I've been well fed ever since." An explosion rocked the temple. Voices shouted in 2 different alien languages, getting closer. "But you're not here to debate ethics," Bellith said, tilting her head. "You're here because you're desperate, because you've tried everything else, because you think 3 wishes will solve your problem." She reached out, one pale finger tracing along his jawline. "So tell me, human, what do you want?" Her touch sent electricity down his spine. Tobias could feel something else too, a hunger in her that had nothing to do with wishes and everything to do with watching another soul damn itself for her amusement. The old texts had warned about this moment, about how she would expect greed or desperation or righteous fury, about how every wish she granted led inexorably to suffering. He'd spent the last 6 months planning this conversation, every word, every angle. "I wish," Tobias said slowly, holding her burning gaze, "to know what you truly desire." Bellith froze. Her finger still touching his face trembled. "What did you say?" Her voice had lost its amused tone. "I wish to know what you genuinely want. Not what you pretend to want. Not what you've convinced yourself you need, your real desire, the one you hide from everyone, including yourself." "No!" The word came out sharp. She stepped back, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. "No, that's not. You can't." The wish took hold. Tobias felt it slam into him like a physical blow, a connection, sudden and absolute, forged between his consciousness and hers. Information flooded through him, not thoughts but feelings. Raw, ancient, suppressed emotions that she'd buried for millennia. Loneliness crushing, endless loneliness. Hunger for something more than suffering, more than power. The desire to feel, to connect, to be seen as something other than a monster. And beneath it all, a yearning for freedom from her own nature that was so profound it felt like drowning. Bellith gasped, her hand clutching at her chest. She could feel him feeling her. The bond worked both ways. She knew that he knew. There was nowhere to hide. "You bastard," she whispered, and for the first time in eons her voice shook. "You complete bastard." Her red eyes were wide, her perfect composure shattered. The demon goddess who had destroyed civilizations was trembling, her breath coming in short gasps as she experienced something she'd thought herself incapable of. Vulnerability? Tobias felt his own heart racing, felt the echo of her panic mixing with his own shock at the intensity of the connection. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd thought he'd gain information, leverage, understanding. He hadn't expected to feel her. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I didn't know it would be like this." "Of course you didn't." Belleth's hands clenched into fists, her horns seemed to darken, shadows gathering around her. "No one ever does. Wishes have consequences, human, even clever ones." The temple shuddered. Voices at the entrance now, weapons charging. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. "Well, Tobias Crane." She straightened, trying to rebuild the mask of control even as he felt the turmoil beneath it. "You've made a very dangerous mistake. You've bound yourself to me. You feel what I feel, and I—" She swallowed hard. "I feel what you want." He did want her. The moment their connection formed, that truth became undeniable. Not just physical attraction, though she was devastating, but something deeper. A recognition. A sense that beneath her cruel exterior was someone worth knowing. And she felt it, felt his desire, his fascination, his complete lack of fear. "2 wishes left," Bellith said, her voice barely steady. "Use them wisely, because now we're linked, and whatever happens to me—" She met his eyes, and he saw something that looked almost like fear. "Happens to you." She vanished in a swirl of smoke just as the first Sarkoth soldier burst through the entrance. Tobias dove for cover, his mind still reeling from the connection, from the ghost of her emotions that lingered in his thoughts. He could still feel her out there, somewhere close, unable to go far because of the bond he'd accidentally created. He'd wanted to surprise her, to throw her off balance. He'd succeeded far better than he'd planned. And now, as plasma fire tore through the ancient temple, Tobias realized he had no idea what happened next. Tobias vaulted over a collapsed pillar as plasma fire carved molten furrows in the stone behind him. 3 Sarkoth soldiers blocked the eastern exit, their scales gleaming dark green in the firelight, rifles trained on his position. From the west, he could hear the distinctive chittering of Zhren warriors closing in. He was trapped. Then she was there. Bellith materialized between him and the Sarkoth, her pale form luminous in the darkness. She raised one hand, and the 3 soldiers exploded into ash. Not blood, not gore, just instant disintegration. "Move," she snapped. Tobias didn't argue. He ran toward the cleared exit, Bellith beside him, her dress flowing around her legs like liquid shadow. They burst out into Velcaris night, the war-torn moon's dual suns having set hours ago. The city sprawled around them in ruins, buildings gutted by centuries of conflict. "There's a safe house 2 clicks north," Tobias said between breaths. "I know. I can feel you knowing it." Bellith's voice was tight with anger. "I can feel everything you're thinking." They ran in silence, taking cover when patrols passed. Tobias could sense her confusion and fury at being vulnerable through their bond. And underneath that, something else. Curiosity about what kind of person would waste a wish on understanding her. The safe house was a reinforced bunker beneath what had once been a commercial district. Tobias keyed in the access code, and they descended into the concrete space below. Emergency lights flickered on, revealing sparse furniture and supply crates. The door sealed behind them with a heavy clang. "Well," Bellith said, turning to face him, "here we are." In the enclosed space, her presence was overwhelming. She stood with her arms crossed, the gesture pushing her breasts up against the low neckline of her dress. Her red eyes studied him with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "You're angry," Tobias said. "And scared?" Her jaw tightened. "Careful, human." "Tobias. My name is Tobias." He moved to the weapons locker, checking what supplies remained. "And you can pretend I didn't feel what I felt, but we both know the truth now." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You think you can end a 300-year war and save the monster who started it." "You're not a monster." "Yes, I am." She stopped inches from him. "I've fed on suffering for millennia. I've ended civilizations. That's what I was made to be." "But you don't want to be." The words hung between them. Bellith's composure cracked, her hands trembling before she clenched them into fists. Tobias felt the wave of emotion through their bond, longing mixed with self-loathing. "What I want doesn't matter," she said quietly. "The curse on the Sarkoth and Zhren sustains me. The hatred, the violence, I feed on it. If the war ends, I weaken, possibly fade entirely." Tobias absorbed this, his mind already working through possibilities. There has to be another way. "There isn't." She turned away. "We are parasites, beautiful, powerful parasites, and you've just bound yourself to one." Through the bond, he felt her resignation. "I don't accept that," Tobias said. "You don't have a choice." "I have 2 wishes left." Bellith spun back to him, her eyes wide. "Don't you dare!" She cut off as the bunker shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, heavy artillery close. "They're searching the sector," Tobias said, checking his tactical display. "Both factions." "Of course they are." Bellith moved to the wall, placing her palm against it, her eyes unfocused. "There are 24 Sarkoth above us, 3 Zhren scout nests. They're coordinating their search patterns." She looked at him. "They've never worked together before." "You're that important to them?" "They worship me. I'm their dark goddess." Her lips twisted. "Even if that purpose is killing each other forever." The building shook again, harder. "We need to move," Tobias said, grabbing a go-bag from the supplies. "Where? They'll track us anywhere on this moon." "Then we make them come to us, on our terms." He pulled up a holographic map from his wrist display. "There's a neutral zone where both sides meet for prisoner exchanges. We arrange a summit." "And say what? They won't listen. The curse runs too deep." "They'll listen if you make them." "I don't want to." The words came out soft, almost vulnerable. Tobias looked at her and through the bond felt the complexity beneath. She was tired. So incredibly tired of being what everyone expected her to be. "Then don't," he said quietly. "Be something else." "I don't know how." Before he could respond, the ceiling exploded. Sarkoth soldiers rappelled down through the opening, weapons raised. At the same moment, the door blew inward, Zhren warriors pouring through in a chittering wave. Bellith moved like lightning. Her hand swept out, and half the Sarkoth turned to ash. She spun, creating a wave of force that sent Zhren tumbling backward. But Tobias could feel her strain through the bond. He fired his sidearm, dropping 2 Sarkoth who'd flanked around her blind spot. The weapon clicked empty. "Behind you!" he shouted. Bellith whirled, catching a Zhren blade limb inches from his throat. She crushed the warrior's exoskeleton with her bare hand, her face twisted in fury that he felt echo through their connection. Not fury at the enemy, fury at the thought of him being hurt. More soldiers poured in, too many. "We need to go," Tobias said, grabbing her arm. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. Bellith's eyes met his. "Hold on to me." He did. The world dissolved into smoke and shadow. Tobias felt weightless, felt reality bend around them. Then they were somewhere else, a rooftop 3 blocks away, the safe house exploding behind them. Bellith collapsed against him, breathing hard. Her skin had lost some of its luminescence. "That took more than it should have," she admitted. "You're already weakening." "The bond, it's redirecting my energy, trying to balance us, making me more mortal." Her eyes flickered to him. "Making you something else." Below them, search parties spread out through the ruins. "I can get us an audience with both faction leaders," Tobias said. "I still have contacts who'll arrange it." "They'll kill you on sight." "Not if you're with me. Not if they think you're still playing your game." He met her eyes. "Can you pretend?" Through the bond, he felt her war with herself, the old habits warring against the new feelings he'd unlocked. "Yes," she said finally, "I can pretend, but Tobias..." Her hand touched his face. "Every moment I'm with you, I feel the hunger for something other than suffering. Maybe you didn't choose this existence. Maybe it was chosen for you." "Does that matter?" "I think it does." They stood there on the rooftop, surrounded by war, bound by a wish neither had fully understood. Tobias could feel her pulse through their connection, could sense the way she leaned, almost imperceptibly, toward him. "2 wishes left," Bellith whispered. "Be careful what you ask for." She didn't move away, neither did he. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken possibility. Then a comm device materialized in her hand. She glanced at it, and her expression hardened. "Both factions are issuing a joint statement. First time in 3 centuries. She looked at him. "They're calling for your execution, and mine, for consorting with a human." "Good," Tobias said. "That means they're scared." "You're insane. You're just figuring that out?" Despite everything, Bellith smiled, a real smile, not the cruel smirk she'd worn in the temple. It transformed her face, made her look younger, almost mortal. "I think I might actually like you, Tobias Crane," she said. "The feeling is mutual." "That's the problem." She stepped back, breaking the contact, though the bond remained. "If we're going to do this suicide negotiation, we should at least look presentable." She waved her hand, and his torn, dust-covered clothes shifted, cleaned, and repaired. She did the same for herself, though her dress somehow became even more provocative in the process. "Was that necessary?" Tobias asked. "If I'm playing the part of wicked goddess, I might as well look it." Her eyes glinted with mischief. "Besides, I can feel that you approve." He couldn't deny it. The bond made lying pointless. 2 days, Bellith said, her tone becoming serious. "I can arrange a summit in 2 days, both leaders neutral ground." Story of my life. They left the rooftop as dawn began breaking over Velcaris, painting the ruins in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in the distance, the war continued. But for the first time in 3 centuries, both sides had stopped fighting each other long enough to focus on a common enemy. It wasn't peace, but it was a start. Conference Hall had survived 3 centuries of war through sheer luck and reinforced architecture. Tobias stood at the entrance, watching both faction leaders arrive with their armed escorts. Commander Gorath Scalebrand led the Sarkoth contingent, his dark green scales marked with golden battle scars. Across from him, Quirex clicked forward on chitinous legs, compound eyes reflecting fractured light. "This is madness," Gorath hissed. "We should kill the human now." Agreed, Quirex's translator rendered her clicks into flat words. "He has defiled the goddess." Bellith laughed from where she stood beside Tobias. She'd dressed for the occasion. Her crimson dress slit to the thigh, her horns polished to obsidian perfection. "Defiled," she purred. "Tell me, Commander, when did you start caring about my virtue?" Gorath's scales rippled with discomfort. "You granted us purpose," he said. "Eternal struggle." "And he threatens that," Quirex added. Tobias stepped forward. "What she began was your destruction. 300 years of war, billions dead, for her entertainment." Both leaders turned to Bellith, who smiled with perfect cruelty. "He's not wrong," she admitted. "Your hatred has sustained me quite nicely." She ran one pale finger along the conference table. But perhaps I've grown bored. She settled into a chair, crossing her legs. So talk. The next hour was brutal. Goroth and Quirex traded accusations, their ancient hatred poisoning every word. Tobias tried to find common ground, but the curse ran deep. "This is pointless," Goroth finally declared, rising. "Wait," Tobias said. 300 years ago, they each summoned you separately. Each asked for victory. You gave them a curse, made them need the conflict to sustain you. "You're not enemies," Bellith said, leaning forward. "You're my livestock." Goroth's scales darkened with rage. Quirex's warriors raised weapons. "Kill them both," Goroth ordered. The hall erupted in violence. Bellith moved faster than thought, her power exploding outward. Sarkoth soldiers flew backward. Zhren warriors crumbled to dust, but Tobias felt her strain through the bond. A Sarkoth blade sliced across his arm, drawing blood. Bellith screamed, not in pain but in fury. The soldier who'd struck him exploded into nothing. The bond pulsed between them. She felt his pain as if the wound were her own. "We're leaving," Bellith said, her voice shaking. "Now." She grabbed his arm and the world dissolved. They materialized in an abandoned apartment complex. Bellith pushed him against the wall, her hands glowing with healing energy as she pressed them to his wound. "You're an idiot," she hissed. "It was worth trying. You could have died. You wouldn't have let that happen." Through the bond, he felt her terror at the thought of losing him. "I'm fine," he said quietly. Bellith's hands were still on his arm, her healing complete, but her touch lingering. She looked up at him, her cruel mask completely gone. "I felt it," she whispered. "When they cut you, I felt the blade." "The bond is getting stronger." "Yes." Her fingers traced the newly healed skin. "It's making me care about things I shouldn't, like whether you live or die." They stood close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. The bond between them thrummed with unspoken tension. "Bellith," he said softly, "don't. Because if you do, I might believe it. And if I believe it, I might do something incredibly stupid." "Like what?" Instead of answering, she kissed him. The bond exploded between them, amplifying everything. Her lips were soft and demanding, her body pressing against his with desperate hunger. Tobias felt her desire, and his own mirrored and doubled, felt centuries of suppressed longing breaking free. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. She made a sound low in her throat, her fingers tangling in his hair, her horns cool against his forehead as she deepened the kiss. Through the bond he felt everything, the fear and the wanting, the desperate need warring with lifetimes of isolation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bellith's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This is a mistake," she said. "Probably. I don't know how to be what you need. I'm not asking you to be anything except yourself." "I don't know what that is." Her hands were still on him. "I've been the cruel goddess for so long." He kissed her again, softer this time. Through the bond, he sent her everything he felt. The attraction, the growing respect. Bellith melted against him. When they separated again, a single tear traced down her pale cheek. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Maybe not, but you want it." "Yes, I want this. I want you. And that terrifies me." Outside, sirens wailed, both factions mobilizing. "We need a plan," Tobias said. "Use your second wish. Wish for the war to end. I'll fade, but the curse will be broken." "No, what if I wished for your existence to be bound to me instead of the war?" Bellith stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. "That's insane. It would work. You'd be sustained by our bond. And when you die, I'd go from eternal to maybe 50 more years. Would that be so bad? 50 years of actually living instead of millennia of feeding on suffering?" "You're asking me to give up immortality, power, everything I am. I'm asking if you'd rather have 50 years of being real or eternity of being empty." Through the bond, he felt her terror warring with desperate desire. The building shook as something heavy landed on the roof. "They're here," Bellith said. "I need an answer." She looked at him, her red eyes searching his face. "Make the wish," Bellith whispered. "Bind me to you, make me mortal." "Are you sure?" "No, but do it anyway." Tobias took her hands. The door above splintered as soldiers breached the building. I wish for your existence to be bound to mine, he said clearly. Your life sustained by our connection, no longer by suffering. As I live, you live. The wish took hold like lightning. Bellith gasped, her back arching as the bond transformed. Tobias felt it too, the connection deepening, becoming fundamental. Her immortality flowing out, his mortality flowing in. She collapsed, and he caught her. Her skin was cooler now, less luminous. Her eyes, when they opened, were still red, but somehow more human. I can feel it, she said. My heartbeat. I forgot what that felt like. How do you feel? Weak, terrified, alive? She laughed, the sound breaking into something like a sob. Soldiers crashed through the door. Bellith raised her hand, but the wave of power that emerged was weaker. She managed to stun the first few soldiers, but more came. We can't fight them all, she said, not anymore. Then we surrender. They'll execute us? Probably. She met his eyes and smiled despite everything. At least we'll die together. They were surrounded in seconds. Gorath pushed through the crowd, his scales dark with rage. You've weakened her, he snarled. Destroyed our goddess. I set her free, Tobias corrected. Take them both, Quirix ordered. Execute them at dawn. As soldiers bound their hands, Bellith leaned close to Tobias, her lips brushing his ear. One wish left, she whispered. Use it wisely. They were dragged away into the Velkaris night, bound together in more ways than one, with only hours until execution, and one impossible wish standing between them and oblivion. The cell was carved from solid rock, deep beneath the old fortress that had once belonged to neither faction. Now both claimed it. Tobias sat with his back against the cold stone wall, his wrists bound with energy cuffs that hummed softly in the darkness. Bellith was pressed against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. She was shivering. I'd forgotten what cold felt like, she said quietly, or hunger, or fear. How long has it been since you were mortal? Millennia. I don't even remember the exact count anymore. Her fingers found his, threading between them despite the cuffs. I used to be something else. Someone else. Before I became this. What were you? Does it matter? That person died a long time ago. Through the bond, he felt her uncertainty. The mortality was settling into her bones now, making everything sharper, more real. The execution scheduled for dawn felt different when you could actually die. Tell me anyway, Tobias said. Bellith was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I was a healer, can you imagine that? I saved lives instead of ending them. She laughed bitterly. My people, we were dying, a plague that nothing could stop. Someone offered me a deal, power to save them in exchange for becoming something else, something that fed on suffering instead of light. You took it. Of course I did. I was young and desperate and thought I could control it. Her hand tightened on his, but the power changed me, made me need the suffering, made me crave it. By the time I realized what I'd become, everyone I'd tried to save was already dead. Tobias turned his head, pressing his lips to her hair. Through the bond, he felt the weight of her millennia, the countless wishes granted, the civilizations destroyed, the endless cycle of feeding and forgetting who she'd once been. You could have told me no, Bellith said. When I offered the wishes, you could have walked away. Would you have let me? Probably not. She shifted against him, her body warm despite the chill in the air. But you surprised me. No one has ever asked about my desires. They only care about their own. Maybe that's the problem. What do you mean? Every species that summons you wants something from you. Victory, power, revenge. But no one ever asks what you want. No one sees you as anything except a tool. Because that's what I am. No, that's what you've been forced to be. There's a difference. Bellith pulled back enough to look at him. In the dim light from the corridor, her red eyes glowed softly. Her pale skin seemed almost translucent, and he could see the pulse in her throat. So human now, so fragile. You're going to die tomorrow because of me, she said, because you tried to save someone who doesn't deserve saving. I don't believe that. You should. She kissed him, cutting off his words. It was different from before, slower, deeper, tinged with desperation. Her bound hands came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing his jaw. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "I need you to understand something," she said. "The third wish. You need to use it to save yourself." "No. Tobias, please. Wish for your freedom. Wish for them to forget you existed. Wish for anything that gets you out of here." "And leave you?" "I'm already dead. I've been dead for thousands of years. I just didn't know it until you showed me what living actually feels like." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Don't waste your last wish on me." Through the bond, he felt her conviction. She genuinely believed she deserved this, that her death would somehow balance the scales for all the suffering she'd caused. "What if I don't want to save myself?" Tobias asked. "Then you're an even bigger idiot than I thought." "Probably." He leaned his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "But I didn't come here to negotiate a peace treaty. I came here to end a curse, and that curse is you, or what you've been forced to become." "You can't fix me with a wish." "Maybe not, but I can try something else." "What?" He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "What if the third wish wasn't about saving us? What if it was about saving them?" "I don't understand." "The Sarkoth and Zren. They're trapped in a cycle of hatred because that's what you need to survive. But now you don't need it anymore. You're sustained by our bond. So what if I wished for them to be free of the curse? To remember why they started fighting in the first place, before it became about eternal struggle?" Bellith stared at him. That would work. The curse would break. They'd be able to choose peace. But it wouldn't save us. They'll still execute us at dawn. Both factions want us dead." "So what's the point?" "The point is that maybe some things are worth dying for." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're insane." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." She kissed him again, harder this time. Her body pressed against his, the thin fabric of her dress doing little to hide the curves beneath. "I hate that you're making me feel this, making me care, making me want to live when I should be ready to die." "Good." "It's not good. It's torture." Her lips moved to his neck, her teeth grazing his skin. "I've never wanted anything the way I want you. Never felt this desperate to have someone. And now we have hours left and I'm stuck in these damned cuffs." Tobias felt the hunger through their bond, centuries of suppressed desire finally given form. She kissed along his jaw, his throat, returning to his mouth with an intensity that left him breathless. "Bellith," he managed. "Shut up," she murmured against his lips. "Just shut up and let me have this. Let me pretend for a few hours that we're not about to die, that we have a future, that I could actually be worthy of what you're offering." He understood. Through the bond, he felt everything she couldn't say. The terror and the longing, the desperate need to feel alive while she still could. They spent the remaining hours in the darkness, wrapped around each other, the energy cuffs making everything awkward but not impossible. Bellith mapped his body with her hands and mouth, memorizing every response, every shudder. He did the same, learning the places that made her gasp, made her forget for a moment what waited at dawn. When they finally exhausted themselves, they lay tangled together on the cold floor. Belleth's head was on his chest, her hair spilling across his skin like crimson silk. "I love you," she said quietly. The words hung in the air. Tobias felt the truth of them through the bond. The first time in millennia she'd said those words and meant them. "I love you too," he replied. "We're going to die." "Probably." "Any regrets?" He thought about it. About the mission that had brought him here, about the choices he'd made, about binding himself to a demon goddess with a second wish and preparing to sacrifice his third for people who wanted him dead. "No," he said finally, "no regrets." She tilted her head up to kiss him one more time, soft and sweet. "Then let's face it together." The door opened. Guards stood silhouetted against the harsh corridor lights. "Time to go," one of them said. Tobias and Bellith stood, their fingers still intertwined despite the cuffs. As they were led out of the cell toward the execution grounds, toward the dawn that was breaking over Velkaris in shades of red and gold, Tobias felt oddly calm. One wish left. One chance to break a curse that had lasted 3 centuries. And if it cost him everything, at least he wouldn't die alone. The execution grounds were an open plaza at the fortress's highest point, giving a panoramic view of the ruined city below. Dawn light painted everything in shades of amber and rose. Sarkoth soldiers stood in formation on one side, Zhren warriors on the other, both factions united in purpose for the first time in 300 years. Gorath and Quirrell stood together on a raised platform, watching as Tobias and Bellith were marched to the center. Energy restraints held them both. Though Bellith's were reinforced, they still feared her despite her weakened state. "Any last words?" Gorath asked. Tobias looked at Bellith. Her red eyes met his, and through the bond he felt her acceptance. But he hadn't made peace with this ending. "I have something to say," Tobias called out, "about the war, about why it started." "We know why it started," Quirrell clicked. "The Sarkoth invaded our breeding worlds." "The Zhren sabotaged our supply lines first," Gorath snarled. "You don't even remember the real beginning," Tobias said. "The curse wiped it away, replaced it with manufactured hatred. But 300 years ago, before the wishes, your people were allies, trade partners. You were building a joint colony on the 4th moon." Silence fell over the plaza. "Lies," Gorath said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The human speaks truth," an old Sarkoth voice called from the crowd. An elderly soldier stepped forward, his scales faded with age. "I was there, before the hatred. We did work together." A Zhren elder clicked forward as well. "The hive remembers, buried deep, but the memory exists." Gorath and Quirrell exchanged glances, confusion crossing their faces. "The curse rewrote your histories," Bellith said quietly, her voice carrying in the stillness. "Made you forget anything except the conflict. Because if you remembered the truth, you might choose peace. And I couldn't allow that." "Why not?" a voice called from the crowd. "Because I needed your suffering," she said, her voice raw. "I fed on it. Your endless war sustained me for 3 centuries while I destroyed other civilizations." She swallowed hard. "You were my livestock." The plaza erupted in angry shouts, weapons were raised. "Wait," Tobias shouted. "She's telling you the truth because she's trying to set you free. The curse is already broken. She can't feed on your conflict anymore. She's bound to me now. You're free to choose." "Choose," Gorath demanded. "Choose what?" "Choose peace," Tobias said. 300 years of death. How many have you lost? How much of your worlds are ash now? But you can choose something different. Remember who you were before the curse." "Too much blood has been spilled," Quirrell said slowly. "The hatred may have started with a curse, but it's real now." "Then earn something else," Tobias said. "Earn peace. It won't be easy, but you have that choice now." He could see the conflict on their faces. Centuries of hatred warring with the possibility of something different. "And what about her?" Gorath pointed at Bellith. "What about justice?" Bellith straightened, lifting her chin. "I deserve whatever punishment you choose. Execute me if that's what you need." Through the bond, Tobias felt her sincerity. She was ready to die for her crimes. But he wasn't ready to let her. "I have one wish left," Tobias said, "and I'm going to use it now." Belleth's eyes went wide. "Tobias, no." "I wish," he said clearly, "for Bellith to feel genuine remorse for every death her curses have caused, every life destroyed, every moment of suffering across all the millennia of her existence. I wish for her to experience the full weight of what she's done, and for that remorse to give her the capacity to change." The wish took hold. Bellith screamed. She collapsed to her knees, her body convulsing as 3,000 years of suppressed guilt crashed through her consciousness. Through the bond, Tobias felt the edges of it, the overwhelming cascade of faces, names, civilizations. Every wish granted in cruelty, every life extinguished for her entertainment. Her horns began to crack, dark fissures running through the obsidian. Her red eyes dimmed, then reignited with something new. Not power, but depth, understanding. Tobias dropped beside her, holding her as she shook. "I'm here." "I can see them," she gasped. "All of them, every face, she choked on a sob. "Oh God, what have I done?" Tears streamed down her pale face, the first genuine tears she'd shed in millennia. Her body racked with sobs as the remorse burned through her. The crowd watched in silence, weapons lowered. Slowly, agonizingly, Bellith's convulsions subsided. She looked up, her eyes no longer the burning red of a demon, but something softer. Tears continued to fall. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry, for all of it, for everything I've done to you, to your people, to countless others." She looked at Gorath, then Quirix. "I can't undo it. I can't bring back the dead, but I'm sorry." The words hung in the air. "That's it?" Gorath asked. "You're sorry?" "It's not enough," Bellith said. "It will never be enough, but it's all I have." She straightened despite the trembling. "So execute me. I won't resist." "No," Tobias said firmly. "She dies, I die. That's how the bond works now." "Then you both die," Quirix stated. "Maybe," Tobias said. "But consider what you'd be killing. A demon who's finally capable of remorse, who could spend the rest of her mortal life making amends. She has knowledge spanning millennia. She could help you rebuild what she destroyed." "Or curse us again," Gorath said. "She can't," Tobias said. "The third wish changed her fundamentally. She's not the same being who cursed you." The elderly Sarkoth soldier stepped forward. "The human risked his life to break our curse. He could have used his wishes for power, for escape. Instead, he chose to free us." He looked at Gorath. "Perhaps we honor that sacrifice by choosing mercy over vengeance." The Zhren elder clicked in agreement. "If we kill them, we remain defined by hatred. If we show mercy, we prove the curse truly is broken." Gorath and Quirix conferred quietly. The crowd waited, tension thick in the morning air. Finally, Gorath spoke. "The human and the demon will live, but they are banished from Velkaris. They have one solar cycle to leave this system and never return." "The Hive agrees," Quirix added. Relief flooded through Tobias. Through the bond, he felt Belleth's shock. She hadn't expected mercy. "Thank you," Tobias said. "Don't thank us," Gorath replied. "Prove we made the right choice." The energy cuffs were removed. Tobias helped Bellith to her feet. She was shaking, her newfound mortality and overwhelming remorse leaving her weak. As they were escorted to the spaceport, Tobias felt the bond between them. Deeper now, transformed by the third wish. Bellith was no longer the cruel goddess. She was something new. "I don't know how to live with this," she whispered as they boarded the transport. "The guilt, the memories." "One day at a time," Tobias said, taking her hand. "We'll figure it out together." "Why?" she asked. "Why save me? Why waste all three wishes on someone who caused so much pain?" "Because I saw who you could be, who you wanted to be beneath all the cruelty." He kissed her forehead gently. "And because everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even demons." Behind them, on Velkaris, Gorath and Quirix stood together watching the transport depart. Around them, soldiers from both factions mingled awkwardly, weapons lowered. The first tentative conversations began, not about tactics or territory, but about memories, about the alliance that had existed before the curse. It would take years, maybe generations, but for the first time in 3 centuries, peace was possible. In the transport, Bellith leaned against Tobias, her head on his shoulder. Her horns were cracked but still beautiful, her eyes still red but human. She was mortal now, fragile. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "We live," Tobias said simply. "We find other places you've cursed and try to help. We make amends where we can. We build something worth having in whatever time we have left." 50 years, she murmured, "if we're lucky." 50 years of being real is better than eternity of being empty. She smiled despite the tears still wet on her face. "You really believe that?" "I do. Then I'll try to believe it too." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving. Thank you for letting me." The transport broke atmosphere, carrying them away from Velkaris toward an uncertain future. Behind them, a 300-year war was ending. Ahead, a lifetime of atonement awaited. But they faced it together, a demon goddess learning to be human, and the man who'd loved her enough to show her how. One wish to understand her, one wish to bind them together, one wish to give her the capacity to change. 3 wishes that had destroyed a curse and created something new, something fragile and precious and entirely their own. As the stars stretched around them, Bellith took Tobias's hand and held on tight. For the first time in 3,000 years, she was afraid, but she wasn't alone. And that made all the difference.